A small hand grabbed his sleeve and yanked hard. A finger pressed against tiny lips. Two words came out in a whisper, so quiet he almost missed them. "Don't speak," the man froze. His boots stopped on the gravel. His breathing slowed. Behind the girl, a screen door creaked half open. A shadow moved inside the house. Something heavy hit the floor. A man's voice barked something muffled. The girl's grip tightened on his sleeve. Her eyes were wide, dry, absolutely steady. That was the part that scared him. Children that scared do not have steady eyes. His name was Daniel Carver. 22 years in uniform. 3 tour overseas. He had walked into rooms full of armed men and felt less afraid than he did right now. What that little girl had just walked him into was about to test every instinct he had left. Stay with me on this one. To understand what happened on that gravel road, you have to know a little about Daniel Carver. Daniel was 51 years old. He lived alone in a small ranch house in rural Pennsylvania. The kind of place where the nearest neighbor is a quarter mile down the road and the nearest stoplight is 15 minutes away. He'd retired from the Army 3 years earlier. 22 years in. Most of those years as a ranger. The kind of soldier you don't read about in the newspaper because the work he didn't get reported. When he came home, he didn't talk much about what he'd done over there. He didn't have to. His wife had passed before he'd ever shipped out the first time. No kids. Just a dog that had died the year before, a workshop full of half-finished projects, and a routine. That routine included a neighbor named Hank Reynolds. Hank was 67. A widower too. A retired electrician who could fix anything with a wire and a prayer. He and Daniel had become friends the slow way. Over coffee. Over fence repairs. Over Saturday mornings sitting on Hank's porch and not saying much. That's the best kind of friendship at that age. You don't need to fill the silence. Now here's the thing. Hank had a granddaughter living with him. Her name was Lily. She was 8 years old, small for her age, with hair her grandfather couldn't braid properly. She'd come to live with him 8 months earlier, after her mother, Hank's only daughter, had died in a car accident. Lily didn't talk much. She didn't cry much either. She just watched. She watched everything. Daniel had only met her a handful of times, but he'd noticed how her eyes followed people. Believe me, kids who watch like that have usually learned something the hard way. That morning, Daniel was walking up Hank's gravel driveway because he was returning a power drill he'd borrowed 2 weekends back. He could have called first. He didn't. That was their way. You showed up. You knocked. You sat down for coffee. But 3 things were wrong before Daniel even reached the porch. First, Hank's old Ford pickup wasn't in the driveway. That was strange. Hank rarely left the property before 9 in the morning, and it was just past 7. Second, there was a black SUV parked behind the barn. Tinted windows. Mud caked across the license plate so thick you couldn't read a single letter. Daniel had been around enough vehicles in his life to know when a plate was muddy by accident and when a plate had been smeared on purpose. This one had been smeared on purpose. Third, the dog wasn't barking. Hank had a beagle named Biscuit. That dog barked at squirrels, at the wind, at the postman, at his own shadow. Right now the property was dead silent. Daniel stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. He didn't put down the drill. He just stood there for a second, listening. Now, if you've never been in a situation where your gut tells you something is wrong before your brain catches up, count yourself lucky. For Daniel, that feeling was an old friend. He'd felt it in valleys halfway across the world. He'd felt it in a hallway in Mosul. He'd felt it on a roof in Kandahar. Right now, on a quiet morning in Pennsylvania, on his neighbor's porch, he felt it again. He didn't reach for a weapon because he wasn't carrying one. He'd come over to deliver a drill. He took one step up onto the porch. The screen door was closed, but the inner door was cracked open about 2 inches. Through that crack, he could see a slice of the kitchen. He could see the corner of the kitchen table. And on the table, sitting on the wood like someone had set it down in a hurry, was Hank's wedding ring. Hank never took that ring off. Not when he showered. Not when he worked on the truck engine. Not when he washed dishes. The man wore that ring like a second skin, and had since 1979. He told Daniel once that his wife had put it on his finger and made him promise. That ring on the table told Daniel everything he didn't want to know. And that's when the small hand grabbed his sleeve from behind the porch swing and yanked. That was Lily. That was the moment the morning stopped being a normal morning. Daniel turned slowly. He didn't yank his arm away. He didn't make a sound. He let the small hand do what it needed to do. Lily was crouched behind the wooden porch swing. Her pajamas had little blue flowers on them. There was dirt on her cheek and a scratch on her left elbow. Her hair was sticking up on one side like she'd been sleeping when something went wrong. She had her finger pressed to her lips. He nodded. Slow. Deliberate. So she'd see it. Then he did something a lot of people wouldn't have thought to do. He went down on one knee. Got his eyes level with hers. Because here's the thing about a scared child. If you tower over them, you become another threat. If you get small, you become a friend. He held up 3 fingers and raised his eyebrows. The question was, how many? She held up 3 fingers back at him. He pointed at the house. He made a fist with his right hand and tapped his own forehead lightly. The question, is Grandpa hurt? She nodded. Then she pointed at her own head. Then her own chest. Then she clenched her own little fist and held it up. Hurt in the head. Hurt in the chest. Hid. Hank was hurt and he'd been beaten. Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't let it show on his face because the girl was watching, but inside, something cold moved through him. He pointed at her. Then he pointed at the woodshed across the yard. The question, come with me. She nodded immediately. He scooped her up. She weighed nothing. He moved low and fast across the open patch of yard, keeping the woodshed between himself and the kitchen window. He didn't run. He'd learned a long time ago that running draws the eye. Smooth movement, low to the ground. That's what stays invisible. The woodshed was a small structure with a sloped roof and 3 barrels along the back wall. Old plastic feed barrels Hank used for kindling. Daniel pulled the lid off the middle one. It was half full of dry wood scraps. He swept those out fast, lifted Lily in, and laid a folded horse blanket on top of her like a tent. He whispered into the barrel. Stay still. Don't make a sound. Don't come out for anyone but me. You understand? She nodded. Just before he closed the lid, she pulled something from her pajama pocket and pressed it into his hand. A small Polaroid. The edges were soft like it had been carried for a long time. The picture showed Hank standing next to a man Daniel didn't recognize. A man in a dark coat, maybe in his 40s, with the kind of square shoulders that suggested federal work. Hank looked tense in the picture. Not smiling. Daniel turned it over. On the back, in shaky pencil in Hank's handwriting, was a phone number and a single word. Don't. That was all. Just don't. Don't what? Don't call. Don't trust. Don't tell. He put the photo in his shirt pocket. He closed the barrel lid carefully and started back across the yard. Now he wanted to get to his own truck. His truck was a half-mile away, but he had a Remington 700 hunting rifle locked behind the seat. He needed that rifle. Whatever was about to happen, his bare hands and a power drill weren't going to be enough. He reached the back fence line and slipped through the woods on the property edge. From there, he had a different angle on the house. He found a window with a thin gap in the curtains. He looked in. What he saw confirmed everything. Hank was tied to a kitchen chair. His head was tipped forward, his chin on his chest. There was blood on his temple, dark and crusted. He was breathing. Daniel watched his chest rise. That was something. 3 men were in the kitchen. One was big. Military big. Thick neck. Crew cut. The kind of size that comes from a barbell, not a job. He had a pistol holstered on his right hip. He was opening cabinets, throwing things on the floor. The second was leaner. Faster looking. He had a knife in his belt and was going through a drawer near the sink. The third was on a phone. He was speaking quietly in Spanish. Daniel didn't catch every word, but he caught 2. La archivo. The file. Daniel pulled back from the window. He started moving toward his truck. He'd gone maybe 100 yards when he heard it. A giggle. A small, soft child's giggle. His blood went cold. Now if you've ever felt your stomach drop straight through the floor, you know exactly what Daniel felt right then. He'd left her in the barrel. He'd locked the lid. She wasn't supposed to be out. She wasn't supposed to make a sound. He turned and ran back. He kept low. He came around the back of the woodshed. Lily was crouched behind it. She was holding a chicken. She had her finger to her lips, and she was whispering something to it. The chicken was wiggling, but not loud. Daniel stopped. He just stood there for a second. He needed a second. He went to her and crouched down. "Lily," he whispered. "I told you to stay in the barrel." She looked up at him with those steady eyes. Then she pointed at the woodshed, at the barrel, and shook her head. She mimed the chicken going into the barrel. She mimed herself crawling out the back. "You put the chicken in the barrel," he whispered. She nodded. "Why?" She whispered back. "Decoy. Saw it on TV." Daniel let out a breath he hadn't known he'd been holding. He almost laughed. Almost. He pulled her into him for one quick hug. Then he checked the yard. Quiet. The men were still inside. The morning sun was just starting to come over the trees. The grass was wet. Birds were calling somewhere. He could do this. Get her to the road. Flag a passing car. Call 911. Simple. He scooped her up again, held her close, and started walking toward the back fence. He could see the wood line just past it. The road was a few hundred yards beyond that. He took 6 steps. A red dot of light landed on Lily's collar. Daniel saw it instantly. The dot was the size of a pencil eraser. Bright red. Steady. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't a toy. It was a laser sight. He didn't think. He dropped. He took her down with him hard. They went sideways into the drainage ditch that ran along the property fence. He landed on his shoulder, twisted in the air, and made sure she landed on top of him. His back took the impact. A bullet kicked up a small cloud of dirt 3 feet from where they'd just been standing. No sound. Suppressed weapon. That single fact rewrote everything Daniel thought he was dealing with. 3 men in the kitchen, going through drawers looking for a file. That was a robbery. That was bad, but it was a known shape of bad. A suppressed rifle covering the perimeter of the property. That wasn't a robbery. That was a tactical operation. Whoever these people were, they weren't here to scare a man into talking. They were here to clean up, witnesses included. Daniel pressed his hand over Lily's mouth, gently but firmly. He whispered into her ear, "Don't move. Not a sound. Trust me." She didn't move. She didn't make a sound. Her little hand grabbed 2 fistfuls of his shirt and held on. He started crawling. The ditch was maybe a foot deep, full of last week's rain water. He moved on his elbows and knees, dragging himself along, keeping her flat against his chest. The cold water soaked through his clothes. He didn't care. He was thinking about angles. The shooter had to be somewhere with line of sight to the back fence. That meant high ground. That meant the ridge above the road. Maybe the old water tower behind the property. He heard boots on gravel. Running feet. 2 sets, maybe 3. The men had heard the shot, even if they couldn't have heard it cleanly. They were moving in. Daniel reached the end of the ditch where it met the wood line. He needed to make a choice. Run with her and risk getting both of them killed. Or hide her and engage. There wasn't really a choice. About 15 feet into the woods, there was an old oak that had fallen years ago. The trunk had broken at the base and rolled, leaving a hollow space underneath where the roots had pulled up part of the ground. Daniel had cleared brush near here once with Hank. He knew that hollow. He carried Lily to it. He laid her down in the dry, soft earth and pulled some dead leaves and a piece of bark over her so all you could see was her face. He looked her in the eye. "Listen to me," he whispered. "I'm coming back. No matter what you hear. No matter how loud. You stay here. You don't move. You don't speak. Not until I come for you. Promise me." She stared up at him. Then she did something he didn't expect. She pressed her finger to her lips and whispered back at him. "Don't speak." His eyes burned for a second. He nodded. He pressed his finger to his own lips. "Yes. Don't speak." He turned and moved back toward the property. "Now hold on. If you're still with me on this one, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. There's more of this kind of story coming. Stay sharp. We're getting to the worst of it." Daniel moved fast through the brush. He found a rock outcropping about 30 feet from the back fence. A good firing position, except he didn't have a firearm. He had hands. He had 22 years of training. And he had the element of being severely underestimated, because as far as these men knew, the only person they'd seen on the property was a middle-aged man with a power drill. The first man came through the brush. He was the lean one with the knife. He was moving fast and a little bit careless, the way someone moves when they're chasing a target they think is fleeing. He came around the rock outcropping with his weapon up, but his attention forward. Daniel stepped out from behind the rock and took him from the side. He clamped one hand over the man's mouth, drove a knee into the back of his thigh to drop him, and got his other arm around the man's throat. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. The man went limp. Daniel laid him down quietly. He took his weapon, a Glock 19 with a suppressor screwed onto the barrel. Professional setup. He took the spare magazine from the man's belt. He moved deeper into the woods. The second man was moving more carefully. He was the big one, the one with the crew cut. He moved in a slow grid pattern, sweeping the area with the muzzle of his rifle. He had a radio earpiece. Daniel could hear faint chatter coming through it. Daniel waited until the man passed his position. Then he moved. The big one heard him. Maybe a twig. Maybe just instinct. He turned fast. But Daniel was already inside his guard. He took the rifle barrel and pushed it up and away. He drove his head into the man's nose. Bone crunched. Daniel didn't stop. He brought his knee up. He twisted the rifle out of the man's hands. He swung the butt of the rifle and struck the temple. The big man dropped. Halfway through, the man had managed to pull a knife. Daniel felt it bite into his left forearm. A clean slash, 4 inches, deep enough to bleed but not deep enough to kill him. He clamped his hand over the wound. He took a breath. He listened. He could hear 2 more men moving back at the house. The third, the one who'd been on the phone, was probably the team leader. And there was a fourth. Somewhere. The shooter on the high ground. That meant the third man might be alone with Hank right now. Which meant Hank had maybe 60 seconds left to live. Daniel started running. Daniel came out of the wood line at a sprint. His left forearm was leaking blood through his fingers. He had the suppressed Glock in his right hand. He didn't slow down at the back porch. He hit the steps in 2 strides. The back door was open. He went in low. The third man was standing over Hank, with a pistol pressed against the side of Hank's head. Hank was awake now. His eyes were open and focused, and there was something in them. Not fear. Calculation. Hank was waiting for an opening. The third man heard Daniel come in. He started to turn. Daniel fired. 1 round. Center mass. The third man dropped. Hank's head came up. Carver. Daniel was on him in 2 seconds. He pulled a knife off the counter and cut Hank's wrists free. Lily, Hank gasped. Where's Lily? Hidden. Safe. Listen to me. How many more? At least 1. The leader. He's been on the phone with someone the whole time. Where is he? Don't know. He left out the front door right before you came in. Hank stopped. His eyes moved past Daniel. Daniel turned. Lily was at the back doorway. And behind her, with a suppressed pistol pressed against her temple, was the fourth man. He was tall. Lean. Calm. He had eyes the color of cold dishwater. He had a small radio earpiece. He had the still posture of a man who had done this kind of work many times before. Drop the weapon, he said. His voice was quiet, almost polite. Daniel didn't move. The man shifted the pistol slightly. I will count to 3. Then I shoot her in the head, then you, then him. Drop the weapon. Daniel dropped the Glock. It hit the linoleum and slid 2 feet. Step back, the man said. Daniel stepped back. Now, Mr. Reynolds. The file. Hank coughed. There was blood at the corner of his mouth. I don't have it. You have it. You will tell me where it is. Or I will shoot the girl in the leg first. Then the arm. Then the head. Hank's face went white. Daniel's mind was moving fast. He could see Lily's hand. She had it pressed flat against her own thigh. Her fingers were spread. Her eyes were on Daniel. She was waiting. She was waiting for him. Daniel said, I know where it is. Hank looked at him. The leader looked at him. It's in the freezer, Daniel said. Hank told me about it last month. Thumb drive. Frozen inside a pack of meat. He said if anything ever happened, he wanted me to know. The leader studied him. His eyes didn't blink. Show me. The leader walked Lily forward, the pistol still against her temple. He kept her between himself and Daniel at all times. He moved like a man who had been trained to take a hostage and never lose her. Daniel walked slowly to the freezer. The freezer was a chest model, against the wall by the back door. He lifted the lid. Inside was a half-eaten loaf of bread, 3 frozen pizzas, and 2 pounds of venison wrapped tight in butcher paper. Hank had butchered a deer that fall. Daniel had helped him. Slowly, the leader said, "Take out the meat. Place it on the counter. No quick movements." Daniel reached in with his right hand. He took the venison. The package was a frozen brick. Maybe 2.5 pounds, frozen solid since November. He lifted it out. Lily's eyes were locked on his. He held the venison the way you hold a thing that is heavy and useful. He turned slowly toward the counter. And then in one motion, he pivoted and threw it. He didn't throw it at the man's head. He'd been trained better than that. He threw it at the man's gun arm. The frozen brick hit the man's wrist and the back of his hand at full force. The pistol fired. The shot went wide. It punched a hole in the cabinet above the sink. The pistol came loose from the man's hand. Lily dropped. She didn't fall. She dropped the way Daniel had taught her in the 4 seconds before, when his eyes had said it without saying it. She rolled away across the linoleum and into the corner. Daniel was already moving. He hit the man at full speed. They went into the wall together. The drywall cracked. The leader was fast. Really fast. And he came back hard. He drove an elbow into Daniel's ribs. Daniel felt one give. He didn't slow down. He grabbed the man's shirt and drove him down to the floor. He took an elbow to the jaw. He took a knee to the cut on his forearm and felt fresh blood come up. The leader got a hand on the pistol on the floor. Daniel grabbed a chair leg from the broken kitchen chair on the floor and brought it down on the man's forearm. The bone snapped. The man screamed. Daniel hit him again. And again. Until the man stopped moving. He stopped. He sat back on his heels. He was breathing hard. His left forearm was bleeding bad. His ribs were screaming. His knuckles were torn. He looked over at Lily. She was in the corner, hands over her ears, eyes squeezed shut. He crawled to her. He gathered her up. He pressed her face into his shoulder. "It's over," he whispered. "It's over. You're safe. You're safe, sweetheart." She didn't say anything. She just held on. In the kitchen, Hank was slumped sideways in the chair, watching them with tears running down his face. Sirens came up the gravel road 8 minutes later. What Daniel didn't know was that Hank, 2 years before, had installed a panic button under the kitchen counter. The button had wired through to a federal line, not the local police. When the men had first come into the house and tied Hank down, Hank had kicked the button with his heel under the table. He'd hit it twice. 2 presses meant emergency. By the time Daniel had thrown that frozen pack of venison, 3 federal vehicles were already a mile out. When the agents came through the door, Daniel was sitting on the kitchen floor holding Lily. He had her wrapped in his jacket. She was quiet, not crying, just holding on to his collar with both hands. The agents secured the house. They took the 4 men out. 3 alive, 1 not. They started medical care on Hank. They wrapped Daniel's forearm in a pressure bandage and told him an ambulance was 3 minutes out. The agent in charge was a woman in her 40s. Calm voice. Steady hands. She knelt down in front of Lily and didn't try to take her from Daniel. She just talked low and gentle. "Hi, sweetheart. My name's Agent Ruiz. Are you okay?" Lily looked at her. Then Lily slowly put her finger to her lips. The agent paused. Then she put her finger to her own lips. She nodded. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "Okay. We can be quiet. That's fine. You just hold on to your friend, all right?" Lily nodded. Daniel felt the girl's shoulders relax against him for the first time. He sat with her on the porch a while later, wrapped in a blanket, while the medics worked on Hank. The morning sun was up over the tree line now. The yard was full of people in dark jackets. Tape across the driveway. A helicopter somewhere far away. Hank had a concussion, 3 broken ribs and a fractured cheekbone. But he was alive. Daniel walked Lily over to the ambulance. Hank reached out with his uninjured arm. She climbed up next to him. She put her face against his chest. He cried. Hard. The kind of crying a man does when something almost happened that he won't ever recover from but didn't. Agent Ruiz came up next to Daniel. She was looking at the Polaroid he'd taken out of his shirt pocket. That's our handler, she said quietly. His name is Dawson. He went dark 3 months ago. We've been trying to bring Hank in ever since. He'd told us he had something. He wouldn't say what. What did he have? A ledger. Names and routes for a smuggling operation that's been running through the marina for 6 years. Hank had been gathering it on his own. He never trusted that anyone wasn't on the inside. And these men, cleanup crew, they didn't know what they were looking for. They knew the file existed. They came to recover it and remove witnesses, including a child. Including a child. Daniel didn't say anything. Agent Ruiz looked at him sideways. You took down 4 professionals with a kitchen knife and a frozen pack of venison. I had help. From who? He looked at Lily. She was sitting in the back of the ambulance, one hand on her grandfather's chest, listening to him breathe. From her, Daniel said. That night Daniel went home to his own house. He stood in his kitchen for a long time without turning on a light. He poured himself a coffee and he didn't drink it. He just sat at the table and looked at his hands. They were shaking a little. They hadn't shaken at all during the morning. They were shaking now. He thought about an 8-year-old girl who had run drills with her grandfather every Saturday for 8 months, because Hank had been afraid this day might come. He thought about how she had pulled him by the sleeve, how she had pressed her finger to her lips, how she had put a chicken in a barrel because she'd seen it on television, how she had pressed her finger to his lips at the end and whispered the same 2 words back to him. Don't speak. She had taught him too. A year went by. Hank healed. He moved a little slower in the cold weather, but he was still on the porch every Saturday morning, coffee in hand. The people who'd ordered the hit were arrested in 3 different countries, based on the file Hank had hidden in the lining of an old recliner in the basement. Lily started talking more. Slowly. A little bit each week. Daniel went over for breakfast every Sunday. He never missed one. He'd cook eggs while Hank made the coffee. Lily would set the table. She liked to put the napkins on the wrong side because it made her grandfather pretend to be insulted about it. One Sunday, she taught Daniel a sign for thank you, then a sign for friend, then a sign for SHH. That last one she demonstrated by pressing her finger to her lips. He pressed his finger to his lips back. She laughed. It was the first time he'd heard her laugh. On Daniel's mantel, there was a new Polaroid. Hank, Lily, and Daniel on the porch. Lily was making bunny ears behind Hank's head. Hank was rolling his eyes. Daniel was almost smiling. The girl who told a veteran not to speak had taught him the only thing he hadn't learned in 22 years of war. Sometimes silence isn't the absence of words. Sometimes it's the bravest thing a person can offer.